Hello and welcome to our recording of the breakout session from our Captivate IQ customer event, Global Attributes Strategies. This breakout event was presented in November of 2024. To give you a quick idea of what's in the content for today, we will be going over global attributes as a whole at a high level. Then we will discuss some general best practices for global attributes before discussing some specific table strategies, and then looking very quickly at some automation capabilities that are upcoming. I am Blake Waymond. I'm a product adoption manager here at Captivate IQ. The product adoption team is responsible for educating, enabling, and consulting customers on the use of Captivate IQ. So, global attributes at a high level, what are they? Global attributes are intended for all calculation variables. It's considered a best practice method for hosting all of your inputs and other variables that are used in commission calculations. Now, really quickly at a glance, they have a few things that are very important and very helpful to them. Built-in effective dating and data validation. You can access them in formulas as well as transformations, and they are accessible with plan management. And lastly, they are able to be centrally managed, which means they don't have to be tied to a particular commission plan. You don't have to go into a commission plan in order to manage them. You can manage variables for multiple or all commission plans at the same time, and it's got a lot of flexibility with how it is managed. Now, to give you a quick glimpse of other ways that customers have historically hosted variables within Captivate IQ, global attributes came out in 2023. So some of these approaches are a little bit outdated just based on when a particular plan may have been set up within Captivate IQ. But you can see that regardless of the other approach, global attributes offers the same and more. So, discussing some quick general best practices for global attributes. First things first, there are two ways to access global attributes to see the tables interact with them. The first is in the data and connections section of Captivate IQ. The second we'll get to in just a moment. Focusing on that first section, the first way to access them inside of data and connections, this should be for table setup, bulk uploading of data, and deletions. Anything that we're doing across multiple plans, ideally for our entire employee or payee base at the same time. If we want to spot check, if we want to do different things, look at certain things, you can filter, and we'll get to that in a moment as well. But generally, when we're doing bulk actions across plans, this is probably where we want to be doing them. If we want to focus on a particular subset of users, generally, I'd say that we want to be looking in the second place to access them, which is within the commission plan section. I would probably suggest that this is where we do anything that we're doing manually. Any manual data entry, any manual data changes, any spot checking with our eye, anything like that. I would also strongly encourage you to consider doing plan-specific additions or changes within this section. Again, you would probably be doing those changes and additions manually, so that fits within this criteria already. Now, as I mentioned briefly, we have filters available in both of these sections. However, within our data and connections section, the filters automatically reset every time that we access the page. The reason for this is so that we don't accidentally hide something from you. You don't accidentally hide something from yourself either. All of the information from the beginning of time for every table is always available. And if you navigate away, we're going to reset that view. However, inside of the commission plan section, these filters are going to be persistent or sticky, meaning that the filters that you apply, they will be remembered if we navigate away. They will also apply for any other admins looking at the commission plan section. And it is independent per plan. So I can have 5 tables in one plan and hide the rest. I can add 4 filters on one of those tables for a particular plan and then have no filters on another plan. All of that is perfectly viable. With filters, as general best practices, there are 2 specific filters that I want to recommend for every single plan, for every single customer who uses global attributes. The first being, on every table within the commission plan section, just go to end date set it to greater than or equal to the start date of your current plan or period group that we're interacting with. This will automatically just protect you, and as your tables start to get really long with multiple years of data, it will pull out any rows that just simply aren't relevant for the time period that we're looking at here. Now, this could also be paired with something like a start date is less than or equal to the last day of the current period for this plan, whether that's a full fiscal year, whether that's a quarter, a month, or however you do things at your company. The second filter that I would strongly recommend is that on the employee attributes table in particular, if you have some way to filter that table down to just the users, just the payees who participate in a particular current commission plan or period group, then filter that table by said column. Usually, the columns that work for this might be a column that contains their role. You might have a column that indicates which commission plan they're in, or some other column or combination of columns that gets you down to just the right people. I would strongly suggest we do that on every plan. Every year, if we are refreshing plans, when you've cloned a plan from a prior year or setting up a new plan, anything like that, just at the very beginning when you set up these filters. Now, we want to actually go into Captivate IQ to see some of these at work. So, diving into Captivate IQ here, remember we have two ways of interacting or reaching global attributes. The first is in the data and connections section. There's a global attributes link right here. Or we can go through a commission plan. We're going to show you both, but we're going to start with the data and connections section. As I mentioned, this is going to show you everything. It will show you every person, every column, every table, everything. Nothing will be hidden from you, so you can't accidentally overlook something. If you're doing a particular task and you want to filter down to a particular group, you want to spot check something, or if you wanted to search a particular user and make some edits to them, you can certainly do that at this level. However, anything that you do here once I navigate away will not be remembered. We will reset to show you everything each time, which is why some of this manual work is actually better to be done at the commission plan level. Within this view, I strongly recommend that we focus on setting up new tables, doing any bulk uploads of new data for our global attributes tables, and then any deletions. If I need to delete a row for any particular reason, or if I have columns that we're replacing or getting rid of, anything that you are deleting, either rows or columns structurally, entire tables, anything like that needs to happen here. Other than that, bulk actions are probably best for this area. The other way of interacting is inside of a commission plan. Now, we're going to be looking at the Enterprise Account Executive Plan a lot, so we're going to start here to get a little bit familiar with it. In any particular plan, once we've clicked into the period group, we will see attributes here. If we click on this, this will give us the global attributes tables that are relevant for this plan. I can hide entire tables. You'll notice that the other section had these 4 tables listed out, which are not shown here. You'll also see that I have filters that are automatically applied. I didn't set these up here on screen. They were already set up for me when I arrived. So, this is in essence what I would recommend we work on, or how we work with our data inside of global attributes. If I ever need to do anything within the Enterprise Account Executive group, then I can come here and do that. If I need to make any additions, if I need to change any of the particular individuals here, I find it's just easier to start from this view rather than do it inside of a huge table that has a lot going on. I would also recommend that if I need to make any additions to this plan or to any of these tables on behalf of this plan, I can do it from here. I can add additional columns, I can add additional rows, I can bring new people in, I can effective date, right? Let's say Addie gets a promotion, I can handle that all within here, and it's just a little bit easier to make sure that I do it correctly with some of the other irrelevant data stripped away. And this can, of course, apply across all the different tables that you might have. So we're going to reset here really quickly. We're going to flip back to our presentation, and that covers our general best practices. Now, let's start talking about tables and table strategies. I want to present a few strategies, the first one being one that we call one big table. Now, the one big table strategy will work well for you if a couple of things are true. Now, before we get into this solution too deeply, I do want to take a moment to just say that these strategies are not completely mutually exclusive. Although I think between strategy 1 and strategy 2, you'll find a path that works best for your organization. And we'll discuss kind of how do I determine which one of these might work better for me. You may find yourself using principles from each of the strategies in some way or another, but you'll probably find one works primarily the best for you. So with that being said, let's dive into this one. This particular solution will work well if you prefer as few places to upload or edit data as possible. If you in the past have had to go to 5, 10 different places to upload different data for different teams, and that's been just taxing and difficult, then a one big table scenario will help solve that pain point. This also works well if your inputs are mostly tied to users directly, rather than something else about the users. Now, this is an important distinction that will apply to every strategy that we talk about. So I want to explain this really quickly here. A good example is for quotas. If your quotas differ from user to user within the same role, the same level, the same team, then that means your quotas are tied to users directly. However, if, for instance, your quota between two users that share certain characteristics will always be the same, that means it's not tied to the user, it's tied to those characteristics, right? And we'll show you an example of things that apply in each case. Last but not least, this strategy works if you pair it with some sort of method for organizing and naming your columns. An example of this would be something that I tend to use, like a bracket SDR bracket at the beginning of each column that only applies to the SDR team. Now, I will suggest, I'll be upfront with you, this is not the strategy that I employ with these example plans that we're going to look at. However, I have set up the tables to show you how you would use this, but we're going to see they're mostly blank because they're not actually in use. So let's jump into Captivate IQ once more, and let's take a look. So once again, especially with a one big table strategy, we're going to be looking inside of the data and connections section because we're looking at everything in bulk. We're going to be having stuff from multiple plans going on, and we want to see it all. What this is really strong at is streamlining, updating information inside of your plans. In a perfect one big table scenario, you have two tables, really. You have an employee attributes table and a plan attributes table, maybe one custom table to handle something else, this, that, and the other. But you probably wouldn't have these two tables, for instance, right? In my case, we might have employees from all sorts of different roles and plans all put together in here. And I just want to bulk import my CSV each month when I get updated people. I get new people coming in, I get people changing roles, I get people getting promoted and termed, all this stuff happening. I just want to import one CSV and be done with it for all of my teams. That's the most important thing to me. Then this strategy might work well. Now you'll see as we start to scroll right here, there's a lot of columns in here. So many that we can't fit them all on one screen. As we start to go, you'll start to see this bracket system. Now this is my naming convention. This isn't the way that it must be done, but it is helpful. If I have any manager plans, any fields or columns that are needed just for managers, I can indicate that with manager. Enterprise AE, they might have some specific fields here that are only relevant for them. Growth AEs might have some meaningful differentiation. And of course, SDRs and CSMs have things that are only relevant to them. Now you can imagine in a real scenario, there might be 20 columns for each one of these groups. Having them placed together in a line here will help me as I'm looking at this to quickly identify who's who and keep me aligned with what I'm changing, what I'm looking at, because you'll start to see that there will be a lot of blanks in a row for big pockets of people, as not everything is relevant to them. Now, this is also very helpful, this sort of naming convention and organizational style, when you are trying to access global attributes within a formula. And we'll look at that inside of a commission plan really quickly. So back into our enterprise account executive, we'll go right into the calculation workbook actually. So I can open up any old fields here. We're actually going to be looking at quarterly quota a few times, so I'll just get used to opening that one up. If I wanted to access any of our tables, right? If I wanted to auto attribute and I wanted to pull in one of our SDR fields, I can use this SDR. Now when I'm looking for fields, I'm only seeing the SDR fields. So if I have 100 columns in this table and I can't remember exactly what it's called for this group, if I have some sort of naming convention, I can quickly get my list down to just the fields that matter for a particular group. Now, that may not seem like the biggest deal in the world to you. However, when you're typing formulas over and over and over, setting up a bunch of new things, setting up a brand new plan, new logic, things like that, I promise this will save a ton of time. So naming conventions are very important if you're going to adopt this kind of a strategy. So we're going to reset here and go back to our presentation to discuss our next table strategy. This one we call the multiple employee attributes tables. This solution works well if you don't mind having a few more places to upload and edit data. Also, if you dislike having to scroll large tables, or if you strongly prefer to hide stuff that isn't relevant, in particular columns. So if you are sensitive organizationally to that big table, if scrolling through that gave you a panic attack and just made you feel icky, then perhaps multiple tables is the way to go for you. Now, similar to the last strategy, your inputs will still need to be mostly tied to users directly. All we're able to do here is essentially split out those different blocks that were all in one table previously into their own individual tables. And what that allows us to do is it gives us organizational advantages. It helps keeps everything clean and simple and organized. It pulls a lot of irrelevant white space out of there. But the trade-off is we now have to update each of those tables individually. We can still do them in bulk, we can still bulk upload, but there's more touch points as compared to the other strategy. Now this is more akin to how I have my plan set up, but we'll start to see as we get going that strategy 3 is primarily what I'm using. So let's start off in global attributes in the data and connections section here just to look at the tables. So I have a few tables that are particular to the CSMs. Right, we're going to open this one up. We can see that it looks very, very similar to my employee attributes section, right? But I have very few columns here. In fact, I would only have columns here that are relevant to the CSMs and none that are relevant to anybody else. So in a real life scenario, I might have 5 more tables like this, and they would each be longer, I'm sure. But the idea would be more tables that are each smaller. And that way I only have the people involved here who are relevant. I have only columns that are relevant to them. Makes very efficient use of what we have. Now you're going to notice something that's different here that we'll come back to in a second, but you'll notice there are 4 rows per each individual. That will be more important in strategy 3. But this is an example of how I might use multiple tables for multiple teams. Now I want to show you really quickly how you would set this up. We'll create a new test global attributes table. We're going to create an empty one. We're not going to get into all the ins and outs of this. We're just going to show you one particular thing. So if you want to set up a specific table for a particular team, you can absolutely do that. The important thing is with your key column, which will be this top one by default, when you select the source for your pick list, you select the employee source. You'll notice there are other options that you can choose from, including custom, which we'll get to with custom stuff later. But the employee pick list lets you basically turn this into a smaller, cleaner, brand new employee attributes table. Now, for the sake of formulas and using it inside of commission plans, this still counts as a custom table. It doesn't, strictly speaking, work the same way as our employee attributes table does. However, it uses the exact same lookup mechanism, right? And so we don't have to worry about having some other list somewhere that we keep updated. It really takes a load off in terms of admin to keep this clean and functional, right? We can have as many other columns in here that we want for whatever plan, but that's how you set it up, was with this employee pick list. So we're going to discard this. The other thing to keep in mind is, again, when we're at the commission plan level, we can hide entire tables that aren't relevant. So we go into attributes here, you'll notice the CSM tables are nowhere to be seen because they're not relevant. If I needed to bring them in, I could. But right now, they're just completely hidden. So if you adopt this strategy, when you look at your enterprise AEs, you'll only see enterprise AE stuff. You'll only see CSM stuff in the CSM plans, etc., etc. And if that makes your heart happy, you feel really good about that, and you don't mind having to be responsible to update things in a couple more places, that's worth it to you, this is a great strategy. Now we're going to reset again as we go into our third strategy. Custom tables. Now, this strategy is opposed to the others are more diametrically opposed, they're more mutually exclusive, you'll tend to go one direction or the other. This strategy can perfectly be fit with either of them, and in fact, I would strongly recommend that everybody use custom tables. Now, this strategy works well if, similar to the other strategies we've discussed, you don't mind a few more places to upload or edit data. More tables means more stuff that you might have to interact with, more places that you might have to look. But this also gives you some freedom to not tie your inputs to individuals or commission plans, to something else. So, for instance, in my plans for my account executives, the quota is tied to their role and level. So if you are an enterprise account executive and you're level 1, I know what your quota is. I don't have to know anything else about you. I don't have to know your name or what was, what you signed when you joined the company. I already know what your quota is. Same thing for growth account executives, level 2s, yada yada. Other examples of this might be their team or their region or something else about your organization. Now, there's another piece here that is really important to highlight, and we hinted at this earlier, but custom tables work really, really well if you have a row-based approach rather than a column-based approach for managing your different variables. Now, an example of this would be something like, instead of having one annual quota that we track against every year, we actually have monthly quotas. Now, in the past, pre-global attributes, we would probably have had to manage this with 12 separate columns, one column for each month. And then we would have to have some crazy nested if statements inside of our plan that look up to the correct column based on the month. A row-based approach would be a single column with 12 separate rows for an individual that each are effective dated for the particular month that they apply to. So, keeping this in mind, let's look at what custom tables in global attributes look like. Once again, jumping back into our data and connections section to get a bird's eye view of everything, we are going to see a few custom tables. We're going to start with our quota table, and then we're going to look at our CSM goals table one more time. So our quota table here, again, my quotas are all based on a combination of your segment, role, and level. If you're an enterprise AE level 1, I know what your quota is. Level 2, I know what your quota is. Manager 1, I know what your quota is, right? And they will always be the same. It doesn't matter, it doesn't matter what you negotiated in your offer, your quota is going to be the same, right? That's something that is not tied to the individual. Hopefully that point is abundantly clear at this point. What this allows me to do is this allows me to just have 14 rows inside of a table rather than having to essentially copy and paste this to every single name inside of this table, right? Without global attributes and without a custom table to do this, I would have to have, an annual quota field in here that had the value copy and pasted for each person, and it would be repetitive and annoying. It's much easier to manage this way. There's some serious efficiency gains in doing it this way. So this is an example of where your inputs are not tied to an individual or to a commission plan. Now, the other way that custom tables are really, really helpful is if we have, for instance, a row-based approach. Now, you'll see here that I have 4 rows for each person instead of 1 row for each person. The reason for that is I have one field, a quarter renewal target, and a quarter payout weight. Now, all of these are uniform just for simplicity, but let's imagine that they weren't. If we did not have a custom table with 4 different rows, we would have to have 4 different columns, one for each quarter renewal, and then we'd have to have 4 more columns, one for each payout weight associated with each quarter. And then when we get into the commission plan, we have to have some crazy if logic that combines them correctly based on the current date and our fiscal year, our quarters. But this way, I can have one column inside of our commission plans that always looks at this field, and based on our dates that we've set out, will always pick the right value. Now imagine that this was 10% and then 40% for Q1 and Q4, and we adjusted this down to be 100,000 and 800,000. That math probably doesn't quite add up, probably increased his quota overall, or renewal target overall, but we don't need to worry about that. Imagine this changed, right? This is now all I have to do is I update 4 fields and hit save, and we're done, right? This is automatically going to be reflected in his commission plan because of the way that we've set it up with this nice row-based approach. And if we change in the middle of the year, if we were to add additional, if we were to split it up by months now instead of quarters, structurally it wouldn't cause me too much grief to be able to do something like that. So again, serious efficiency gains when we're able to do something like this, take a row-based approach in a situation where it makes sense. So these are both examples of where a custom table is super, super helpful. Now, the last thing that I want to show you is, again, with reference to our quota tables, how you can use, for instance, these values to look up a custom table value. Rather than having to hard code what to look up, I can use Aaron Johnson's quota role, which is just a combination of his segment, role, and level, right? So if I have these 3 things inside of the employee attributes table, then I can look up automatically on the quota table to find his annual ARR quota. And we're going to look at that inside of the commission plan. So we're going to go back to our quarterly quota that we looked at before. We're going to open it up, pull it to the middle of the screen. So we have 2 formulas here. Attribute, which is what you're using when you want to look up to a custom table, and auto attribute, which is what you would use when you want to look up to the employee attributes table or plan attributes table. So all we're doing is we're saying, give me the quarterly ARR quota for this person. And in order to get that, I'm going to give you the quota role from employee attributes using the auto attribute formula. Now, in each case, we have to pass an effective date because everything's effective dated, right? So in both cases, we're going to be passing the close date. That's all that's happening here. So we can, in fact, use this formula to chain 2 tables together using our employee attributes table and then our custom table to ultimately get that custom value that we want. So that's all we had to do, and it automatically will pull in quarterly quota data. And if there's ever a change, right? So if we see a change in 7.1, if I go to 7.31 and we start scrolling down, we should see the bump from, where's our quota table? Right here. We should see the bump from 400 to 500,000 reflected as we start going down. There it is. Bump from 400 to 500,000, automatically done for us. So when you use custom tables efficiently, they're very, very powerful. Okay, last but not least here, too far, automation. So I wanted to quickly just discuss an upcoming feature that will allow you to take advantage of data connectors to pass information from your various sources directly to your global attributes tables. So an example of this might be, we have an HRIS system. We have a data connector set up within Captivate IQ that automatically pulls that into a data workbook. And now we can automate that data workbook to say, pass everything in here into my employee attributes table or a custom table. It doesn't matter. This will allow you to have very, very seamless automated flow of data from your different systems as inputs into Captivate IQ to take as much of the manual work out of it as we can. There will be continuing in the future more automation available within global attributes as well. Thank you all for your attendance, for watching this video. Thank you.